Welcome csc200 to ex10, and we're going to be working with phpMyAdmin to create a small sample database, and we're going to add some records to that database, and then what we're going to do is eventually create a web front end to that database that we can add entries to from the web instead of doing it through a database tool. So we're just going to use Spongebob characters as just kind of a starting point, and eventually we're going to create a contact form after that. But just for now, we're going to work with Spongebob characters. I've done that in the past, so everybody knows the Spongebob characters pretty much. So I'm going to go into my GourmIDE, and I'm here at my Google page. If you don't have it bookmarked, I just want to remind you that if you go to GourmIDE, just search for that, because I've had some weird things pop up. So just make sure you always type in GourmIDE, and then the first thing that comes up should take you to the page that looks like this. So if you get here to the GourmIDE, you're fine, and then we'll sign in. And once you sign in, you want to run your container, your Gorm PHP container that you've been working in. Now I'm logged in here from my last time I was working. Last time I was working, I think I was working on ex9, and I'm going to close this up so I don't have anything open right here. But we're going to create a folder called ex10, and like we mentioned last time, you should be able to just make a folder. Make sure you click on that and then hit the plus sign, and I'll add a new folder. And I can see this is highlighted, so I know I'm going inside my Gorm. And you could always drag it to the right place if you miscreate the folder in the wrong place. So I'm just going to call it ex10. And that's all we have to do right now. And before we start anything up with phpMyAdmin, what I'm also going to do is go into ex9, and hopefully you're done with ex9, and I'm going to right click on this file, and I'm just going to copy it, and then I'm going to go into ex10, and I'm going to right click and paste it. And your index.php in there, all I want you to do right now is just rename it, and they have a rename option, and just call it display for now, because it's going to be our output file. So we're going to call it display right now. We are going to eventually add an index page, but just for now we'll call it display. So that means if we need to get to it from our web directory, we have to put in the name display. Typically it will default to index, so we would have to put in that name. So I'm just going to do that right now, and that's the file we just worked on. So we're going to edit that when we output some of our records from our database. Another thing I'd also like you to do inside here is in your ex10 is just create a new file. So you could go new file, and I'm just going to call it ex10.sql. So make a SQL file, just like we did when we were working in Python Anywhere. So ex10.sql, and just hit OK. And make sure that it's in there. And we don't necessarily need it open right now, so you can close out of it. There's nothing in there. We're going to put some SQL code in there, just like we did in Python Anywhere. So just make sure that you have two files in there, display.php and ex10.sql. And what I'm going to do next, I don't have anything open. I'm going to open up my start text file just so I could get my MySQL running and get the Apache server started. So I usually just copy this and put it down here at my prompt and paste it. And then you should do the restart as well. And that's all you should need to do right now, just these two. And we should be ready to check out phpMyAdmin. Now we haven't done this for a while, and the way we would do that is we'd still go to our web directory, so we'd still go to project and go to this running URL and click on this little icon here to open it up. And instead of clicking on here, I'm just going to go right after here and just put a / and just type in phpMyAdmin. And that should take you to here. And if you remember, your username is phpMyAdmin, and your password should be root, and then you would hit go, and that should launch it. There were 5 default databases that were here, and we created world. Now we're going to create another one now, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to databases, and we're just going to create it through phpMyAdmin. I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to call it Spongebob. And you can keep it all lowercase. It's going to be all lowercase because we've been doing that with our databases, just like world and countries and things like that. We'll call it Spongebob. So if you have a hard time spelling SpongeBob, call it SB. But I'll call it Spongebob, and then I'll hit the create button. Now the first thing that'll come up is it'll ask you to create a table. Now we've done this with code, and that's fine to do it with code. But for now, we're going to just work with phpMyAdmin a little bit. And first of all, we're going to create a table, and we're just going to call it characters. Now, again, I'm going to try to spell this right. C-H-A-R-A-C. I'll just call it characters, and I'll keep this lowercase. I won't use a capital C like I was using with countries. I'll just keep everything lowercase. We're going to start off with 6 columns. We're going to have an ID, a first name, a last name, a species, a gender, and a city, I believe. So we're going to have like 6 things in here. So this is our table that's going in our Spongebob database. So we're just going to make some characters in here. And then I'll hit my Go button. Now, it just created that. It just used SQL to do that. Now, right away, it's asking us to set up our columns. That's what's happening here. And we're going to do that. Instead of writing code to do it, we're just going to enter things. So we're going to make 6 columns. The first one's going to be ID. The second one's going to be first. We'll do everything lowercase. And then it's going to be last for last name. And then it's going to be species. And then it's going to be gender. And then it's going to be city. All we're going to have right now. So ID, first, last, species, gender, city, all lowercase. Now they're all not going to be integers. This one's going to be an int. And I'll just put in a 3 for now, although you don't have to put anything here. And the one thing you have to do here is you have to scroll over to the right and check AI, because we're going to auto increment that number so we don't have to keep putting it in. And then if this comes up, just hit go. It'll indicate that it's the primary key. So we're just going to check auto increment, and it'll write code to do that. So that's all you have to do for that. And then for these, like first name, make it varchar, and for last, varchar, and for species, varchar, and for gender, we're going to do something called enum, which we'll get to, and you have to scroll through to look for enum. Here's enum down here in front of set. So there's enum, and then city is just going to be varchar. And then what we'll do is we'll put in the lengths in here. Now I'll just put 30 for the first, 30 for the last, 30, even though we're not going to use that many, I'll use 30. Now for enum, what we're going to do is we're going to use edit enum set values. And if you click on here, you could get rid of the 4th one. Just hit that little minus sign. And we're just going to put in M for male, F for female, and O for other. And we'll just hit go. That's all you have to do. You don't have to put quotes around here or anything like that. And it will automatically put quotes in when it creates the SQL code to do that. And then varchar down here, what we're going to do is we're going to put in, I'll put 30, I guess, in here, again for the city. And everybody in our characters are from Bikini Bottom. So we're going to put in the default. And that's under the default column here. They have a column for default. And we're going to put as defined. Now I'm going to put in Bikini Bottom. And I'll put in quotes here, Bikini Bottom. Now, I'm doing this because I'm not supposed to put quotes. I want to show you how to get rid of these. So you don't really have to put in quotes here, but I'm doing this. I'm making this mistake on purpose. So you can do it too, because I'll show you how to fix it then, because it's very easy to fix in phpMyAdmin. But I'm going to do that first, and that's fine. It's not going to create any problems. So let's just double check this again. Make sure that we have our 6 columns, ID first, last, species, gender, city. Make sure we have the right types, int, varchar, 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 enum, and then city is varchar. So the only int we have is the ID. And ID is going to be auto-incremented, so that's why we have AI checked there. And down here we have as defined, we put Bikini Bottom, and we used an enum, and we put those values in there for the enum. So we're ready to go, and it's a little confusing in here because you think, should I hit go? Or should I hit save? Actually, hit save at the bottom, because go is for adding a column. So we're going to hit save at the bottom, and this will create basically our table, and now it's going to create the column structure. So I'm going to hit save, and these are our columns, and notice it's under structure. These are our columns in our table right now. So if we mess something up and we need to fix it, we have a place to go and do that. Now what we're going to do now is insert some records, and we're going to do it through phpMyAdmin, and then we'll do some code as well. So I'm going to go to Insert, and again, we're doing this all through the tool. And they have 2 kind of areas here to create things. And notice one says ignore, so I'm going to uncheck that. We'll do 2 at a time. We'll insert the first 2 characters from SpongeBob SquarePants, which is going to be SpongeBob and Patrick. Now, over here, function, we don't have to do anything. And we don't have to do anything for ID because we're auto-incrementing. But first name, I'm going to put in SpongeBob. And you don't have to put a capital B, you could just leave it all lowercase. And his last name is SquarePants, and his species is a sponge, and he's male. Notice you have radio buttons here. And his city is Bikini Bottom, so you don't have to put anything in there. Now we unchecked ignore, so now we're going to put in Patrick. Again, we don't have to put in an ID. We're just going to put in Patrick. Patrick is his friend, in case you're not aware of SpongeBob characters. And his last name is Star. He is a starfish, and he is also male. And he's from Bikini Bottom. So you just have to hit one of these goes, and they'll basically add these elements to our database or to our table. So I'm going to hit go, and here's your code that was created. And what I'd like you to do before you do anything else is copy this code. You can copy it down here, or you could copy it up here, because we just inserted, and notice it. We know how to do this, but it did this for us. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to highlight it and do a Control-C or a Command-C, and I'm going to go back to Gorm, and I could cancel out of this thing, and I could close up this because I have everything's running okay. We connected okay. And I'm going to go back into ex10 and go into here, and I'm just going to paste my code. And what looks nice in here, I'll move this over a little bit so we have more room, but what looks nice is if you take the parentheses and put a return in front of it, and then put values on a separate line, and then put the other parentheses on a separate line, and then put the next parentheses on a separate line. It just kind of makes it a little easier to follow visually. And notice for each item there's a comma, and then when you're done it puts a semicolon. Now when this code was created, it put null in here because we didn't put anything in for the ID, and it put in Bikini Bottom. And the reason I wanted to show you this, the reason I kind of made a mistake on purpose, is because it used escape characters, because I didn't need to put quotes in there, but it put them in automatically. So I'm going to get rid of these in here, even though I don't have to do this again. We're going to put other characters in here, but I only want single quotes in here. Also notice that it does create these little back ticks, which is okay. That's actually on your tilde key, which shift and hit your tilde key, I believe, to do those. You don't have to have those, but as long as it's doing those, it's okay. And so you can see what it's doing. It's inserting into characters table, and it's putting these items. Now, we actually don't necessarily have to have, after all that, the next time we do this, we're not going to have this when we do the next ones. And we're not going to have Bikini Bottom when we do the next ones. So I'll get rid of the whole Bikini Bottom. Now I just showed you that those escape characters are in there. And they both end with M because they're male. And the reason I showed you that is I want to go back here, and if I go to browse, I'll see basically my table so far. Now if you get this stuff, just ignore all. Don't worry about that. And you can see it put quotes in here, and we don't necessarily want quotes in there. That shouldn't be part of the data. So you can do this automatically. I mean, you could go into your structure of your city. So here's our city. Remember, that was the default. So what I could do here is I could click on this and I could hit change for any other ones that we'd want to do, and then I could just get rid of this. I could backspace that, and I could backspace that. So if we use this for anything else, it won't put quotes in there, and I'll just hit save. So that was under structure, and that was just looking at our column setup. And if you had any mistakes or anything, you could fix them there. Now I'm also going to go back to browse and just check out the items in our table, and just keep hitting ignore all. I'm not sure why that's coming up. Now it didn't change these because they're already in there. Now if you needed to change these, you could certainly write code that says alter, alter table or whatever, or you could just go in here and just hit edit and just go back and just take them out here. And then hit go and just hit ignore all again. And then same thing for this one. We're going to hit edit, and we're going to backspace, and we're going to backspace. And the only reason I did that is just to show you how easy it is to fix these things. We don't have to write any code to do it. You could go in and edit any of these things. If you spelled them wrong, if you had a problem with a capitalization or anything like that, you can easily fix it. So I'll hit go here, and I'll hit ignore all again. Okay, so now everything's fixed in here, and we're going to create probably about 6 more, and we'll do it all at one shot. And you can see they have their ID numbers 1 and 2. And I'm going to go back here, and this is set up the way we want it. Now we don't need, I could get rid of this too. We should have the same number. So if there's 4 down here, we don't want 6 up here. We're going to get an error. So we don't need to insert city, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I don't need to insert ID, so I'm going to get rid of that. So now we're going to have 4 and 4. First, last, species, gender. and then we're going to have SpongeBob or whatever. Now we're going to change these. So I'm going to go change these, and you can copy and paste these, but the next one I'm going to do is going to be Squidward. So I'll do Squidward next, and then Squidward's last name is Tentacles, and he is an octopus. You might think he's a squid, but he's not. He's an octopus, and he's male. And then I'm also going to do Sandy, which is their friend, and her last name is Cheeks, and she is a squirrel, and she's female. So we have our first female. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy 2 more, or I'll copy even 4 more, but I'll do 2 at a time here. And I'll do 2 at a time so I remember to take away this semicolon and put a comma there so that there's only a semicolon at the end. Because as many of these you have, you only want a semicolon at the end. So now instead of Squidward here, we're going to throw in Mr. Krabs. His first name is Eugene, and his last name is Krabs with a K, and he is a crab, and he's male. And then we'll put his daughter in here, and that's Pearl, and her last name is Krabs, and she is a whale, and she's female. And then we'll do 2 more. We'll have 8 total in here, but we're going to do this all at one shot. And then we'll throw in Poppy. Probably don't know who that is. Poppy Puff, the boating school instructor. And she is a pufferfish. It's okay if it's 2 words because it's in quotes, and she's female. And then the last one we'll put in here, you could almost throw anybody in here, but I'm going to throw in Larry Lobster, and he is a lobster, or he's male. And we don't have any others in here. You could put a computer in there or something. 6 more we're going to put in here, and I'll make sure I get rid of any semicolons and put a comma in here, and make sure that only the last one has a semicolon, all the others have commas. And that's why it's nice to put these on separate lines. And we did this with the states and the cities and all those kind of things. So you should be familiar with doing this, and everything should look okay. If you look at it, it should look okay. I can even save what I have so far. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy this code, and instead of like adding all these things to the fields, which isn't that easy to do either, we're going to put these into our database. So I'm going to copy this code right here, and I'm going to go back to phpMyAdmin, and we would do that in our SQL tab, and you could just highlight what's here and paste over it, and everything looks okay, at least as far as the colors. Just double check your commas and your semicolons and things like that, and you can see it's using the 4 of these things are over here from our columns over here. We're not using ID and city, and we're not using any IDs and cities here, so we should be able to add these to our database. And because we have a default bikini bottom, we shouldn't have to put that in, and because we have auto incrementing ID, we shouldn't need that either. So we're just going to go down to the bottom right and hit go and see what happens. And when you see green, that's a good thing. 6 rows inserted, and this is what we inserted. So we already have that. We have that saved already. And then you want to go to browse and make sure that everything's okay. Just hit ignore all, and we should have 8 items in there. And when you're in here, you can sort these by, if you want to sort them by gender, you could click on there, and that way there's all the males and the females. If you want to sort them in alphabetical order by last name, you could do that. And you can see whenever you do that, I'll hit ignore all, it shows you the SQL that's created up there. So this is a tool you're using, so you don't have to write SQL. I like writing SQL, and I think it's good for anybody to learn SQL. I think it's always better to learn the code first, and then find tools that you might want to use that work with that better. So this is our database that we're starting out with. That's all we're going to do right now, is just kind of work with these 8 things, and we're going to see if we can display them to our page. So I'm just going to leave this open right now that this is saved in here. And there's our Spongebob database. I want to note that it's called Spongebob, all lowercase. And I'm going to go back here, and we could put some more SQL in here eventually, but I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to open up my display page, which was recently was the one we did for ex9. So you want to go in here. Let's change it to ex10, and let's just call it Spongebob DB, something like that. But I'll put ex10 in here. And remember, this is the one we used to create our nice looking table for our world database. And that worked fine, except if I scroll down here, and remember, if we go into localhost phpMyAdmin, that's all right, except this is going to be Spongebob. So we need to make sure this is Spongebob, and that has to be the same name that we're using in here of our database. So that's Spongebob. And then what we're going to do is look through some of our code here. Now, we could use all this same connection code because we have everything right. All we had to do was change our variables. But if we go down here, we're not going to have this thing that selects everything from Oceania. We're going to have to change that, and we're going to have to change this. Now, what's nice is we only have 4 things here, and that's all we're really going to need, although we are going to actually display our ID, and we are actually going to display our city. So we're just going to modify these. And actually, let me take a break here, and we'll keep the video a little shorter, and we'll come back and we'll display this to a page in part 2 of this video.